All right. I'm excited to introduce to our community today Taylor Stewart, licensed architect with over 25 years of experience. His book, Conscious Home Design, has hit the #1 bestseller list in 7 countries so far. Amazing. Specializing in single and multifamily homes and intentional communities, he works with clients all over the United States. And it's going to be interesting because I can see our listeners going, how is this going to have anything to do with my health and wellness journey? And I just have to promise everybody that Taylor's here to open our minds to how our living spaces can really affect. We're going to talk things like adult happiness. We're going to talk how even the sunshine can really ramp up our motivation. There's just so much buried in here, and I'm so excited to have you, Taylor. Welcome.
Thanks, Lindsay. Really glad to be here. Thanks for having me as a guest on your podcast. I would just like to make a promise to the audience because I think a lot of people are thinking, well, architect, that's interesting, but I don't have any plans to do a major home renovation or build a new house or something. How is that relevant for me? I think by now everybody knows about the mind-body connection. And my job is to help people understand a little bit more about the mind body environment connection because we know that we know that that's a thing as well, but it's less understood. And so even if someone's living in a rental apartment and they have no plans to make any changes, there's still little things that we can do, little tiny shifts that actually have a really big a massive potentially impact on our health and well-being and our just our sense of satisfaction. And so I'd like to share a few of those things that anyone can implement today in our discussion. I feel like understanding how our environment, especially our home, because we spend so much time in our home, understanding a little bit more about the way it affects us is like an essential life skill, just like knowing how to dress for the occasion or how to prepare a well balanced, nutritious meal. It's really going to serve us in the long run. Really excited, very passionate about this subject. And thanks again for having me, Lindsay.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And already so well laid out and stated. And it's very serendipitous that we have you today because it's interesting. I run these accountability groups at the kickoff of every month, and I've noticed the declutter type thinking coming in as some of the goal setting. And I feel like it's something that we can know. And to your point, like do have some understanding of it, but then it's almost like until we see how it plays out for ourselves with our mental load, with our moving forward with it's always surprising to me how much of an impact it does have. So you're going to actually bring like research into this topic today. And I'm just so excited about it. So I'm going to just hand the mic over and let you run with this where you think it's most important to start. You have a Harvard study about this adult happiness. Do we start there?
We sure can. I just would love to respond to one point that you just brought up, which is actually, if you can believe it, in all the interviews I've done, it's pretty unique. You touched on this idea of not really knowing until you experience it, kind of a thing. And it called to memory experiences that I've had of where I'm going for body care, like I'm going to my chiropractor for an adjustment, or I'm going to get a massage, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I'm probably due. This would be nice to go. I'm doing okay, but just regular maintenance. And then I go, and then all of a sudden, like I'm on the table, and then I'm like, oh my God. What was I thinking? I felt like I was walking around like Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and suddenly it's been like
Yes.
all this tension has
Uh,
been released. I'm like, oh my God, I had just
I'm
gotten
back.
used to this extreme discomfort. And now I'm see the shocking difference, right? And so
Yes.
it can be like that in our homes so much, right? And so I would really encourage people to try some little shifts and see what that feels like for you. Yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness. Great example.
I think other people could relate to maybe not the exact story if they're not visiting the chiropractor, but there are
Yeah.
things like that where you think you're doing okay, but it's not until the after effect that you go, wow, I was really out of alignment.
Yes, I agree. Oh my gosh, that was great. I will also say that people before appointments sometimes are like, I almost canceled because I didn't really know what we'd talk about today. And then they walk away like, oh, I really needed that. Like I'm set for
Right.
the week.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, yes. Okay,
Mm.
super, super. Yeah. And this is why we go to experts because they accelerate our progress. It was Seth Godin who said, uh, 10,000 hours, right? It takes 10,000 hours in a subject to get expert level status or something, rule of thumb. Obviously, some things take longer, some things take less, but 10,000 hours have mastery compared to average population in a subject. And so when we go spend time with someone who's done that kind of work, they can see around the corners. They know the
Mhm.
questions to ask that we don't know to ask ourselves because it's not our field of expertise. And so the quality of your question determines the quality of your outcome. And so for me, as an architect, I've put in tens of thousands of hours before I even wrote the book. The book, Conscious Home Design, came out 20 years after I had been practicing, working in the industry. And so, that represents tens of thousands of hours of real world experience. And it just took that long for the ideas to settle in. I remember seeing a YouTube video, like a high school science teacher or civics teacher or something, where he had a jar on the desk and he had rocks and pebbles and sand. And he found that if you just put in all the sand, all the little things, there's no room for the rocks, the big important stuff. And so you got to put the rocks in the jar first before the other things go in. And when I was looking to write the book, initially I had this massive thing, all my downloads, all these brain dumps that I'd collected over the decades. And I was like, my goodness, no one wants to read a 42 chapter book on architecture. It's just too boring. My intended audience is not young architecture students. I said, people don't need to know everything that I know. It's just way too much. So I said, how can I condense this down so it's just the stones? So we just put the nuggets in there that anyone, even if they never hire an architect, can look at this and take value from it. And so I worked very hard. I hired 3 editors to come down to this very short, sweet, accessible book that you can read in about an hour with no design background at all. And, I always knew I was going to write a book, even from my college days. But I didn't think it was going to take me that long to get it out the door. If you'd asked
Mhm.
25-year-old Taylor what my career trajectory and
Mhm.
my milestones were going to look like 20 years on for the book to publish was not that original
Right.
timeline. But it is what it is. You just have to go with the flow. So, one thing I was very certain about is that I didn't want to write another style guide. There's plenty of great designers, talented designers out there that know about textures and color combinations and different materialities and stuff. It's all wonderful. But I was more interested in a human experience, and I don't want to say superficial, but at a more profound level, and things that were more universal, as opposed to, oh, well, I like blue or I like green, rather than personal preferences, which are valid and super important. I assume when you hire a designer or an architect, you're going to get your personal preferences. You're going to love the style of what you end up with. But if you have the most perfect shoes or the best outfit, but it's 3 sizes too big or too small, not great. It could serve you much better. And so let's focus on the fundamental things that are all about function and flow and actually helping you be the best version of you, because that home may be perfect for someone else, but for you it's only a 6 out of 10. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's not a one size fits all. So let's find those things first and then go for the stuff. So conscious home design is about these sort of scientific and universal principles that help all human beings. And we start with those are the rocks, and then we've put in all the personal stuff on top. And so I'm trying to give the big 10,000-foot overview so people understand the why, because I find that when people understand the why, they're much more likely to take to heart and start implementing the how. And so this is all to get to your question about the Harvard study, which is a little bit more of the how. It's starting to get into the how territory. When I was researching the book Conscious Home Design, I came across this study, and it is the largest of its kind. They've studied thousands of individuals. It began in 1938 and it's still going on to this day. So 88 years on. They've studied generations, because all the original participants have since passed on, but they onboard young adults and then track them for their entire life. and say, okay, who are these people? Where do they come from? What's their background? What's their outlook on life? What's their health? Do they come from opportunity and financial resources, or do they come from poverty and struggle? What's their relationships like? What's their physical health like? What's their career goals and trajectory look like? And so they just did a total snapshot of these individuals and followed them through their whole life, and periodically would get them back and update the status. What they found is that throughout life, the ups and downs we all have, some health challenges or business success or failure or career changes or whatever, whether they lived in a big fancy house or whether they had a very modest house, some of them even without running water, they found that while all these things matter, the single biggest predictor of people's happiness and their sense of fulfillment in life and their life expectancy, statistically, their very longevity, was tied directly. The single biggest predictor of these things was the quality of their relationships, their
Mm.
connections with others, with the world. When I found that out, I thought, oh my, all right, stop the press. We have to camp out here because the highest goal of architecture is to help facilitate the human experience, to help people live happily ever after. And so here we have data saying single biggest factor is relationships. So I have to ask myself, okay, what does relationship even mean? That's a big word. How do we define that? And so that once we can measure it, we can then try to find ways to intentionally create opportunity for it and support it in the home. And so the Harvard study was very clear that relationship was not limited to a romantic partnership. If you're single, you can still live a very rich, happy, productive life. Relationships included all of the relationships, even the little ones, like a Saturday morning when you go out for a coffee at the local shop. You might not even know the name of this person, but maybe you recognize their face, or maybe they recognize you and they know what you like and they can ask you, do you want the same thing as before or whatever? It's like even these little relationships are all contributing factors in our sort of bouquet of human connections that we have in life. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand this relationship thing. I had done a lot of my own work too, reading many books on relationship. But I found out that the Greeks have 7 different words for love, depending on how it shows up. Now, if you're between parent and child, or two best friends, or between a person in their community, or lovers, so they've got eros and agape and filial and storge, et cetera, et cetera. That was interesting, but I wanted to know more. And so I kept on exploring this relationship idea. What I found is that all of our relationships are going to fit into one of 3 broad categories that I've identified as giving, receiving, and reciprocal.
Mm.
And so examples of giving relationships are ones where we show up as the primary giver. And so these are relationships that we have where we are a coach or a mentor, where we're sharing our knowledge and encouragement with others. Children that we're teaching, educating, or parenting, or babysitting, or raising somehow. Even plants and animals, whether you have pets or a bird feeder outside, that's a giving relationship that you've initiated. And so those are giving relationships. And of course, the truth is, there's no such thing as a one sided relationship. All relationships have some sort of exchange, a give and take energetically and experientially. But at face value, those are examples of giving relationships because we're taking the first step in a giving role. So reciprocal relationships are ones like you and I are having right now, where two people show up on equal footing, each in their own world and field of knowledge, and there's a give and take. It goes back and forth. And relationships that we have with our friends or peers and colleagues, spouses, significant others, it's different than a giving relationship. For instance, if I was teaching children, I might have to put on sort of a facade of best behavior or like a role model face, which is fine. But as a reciprocal relationship, I can let my hair down a little bit more and just be a little bit more natural, and I don't have to worry about those things. And so it's a different quality of relationship. And then we have our receiving relationships, and those are the ones where we are the primary beneficiary of someone else's care
Mm.
and wisdom and nurturing. And so relationships that we have with our mentors and coaches, our teachers, our parents, elders and ancestors, even heroes or inspirational figures, spiritual figures, anyone that's going to encourage us to be the best version of ourselves, or be our authentic selves, or stretch into our possibility. These are the three broad categories that I found. And once I could identify that, then I can start looking and say, well, what would it look like if every home had not just opportunity vaguely for relationship, but for all three kinds of relationship. And so if someone says, oh, well, the kitchen, that's probably a giving relationship because I'm preparing food for others. It's like, yes, I suppose it is. But what would it look like? Is it even possible so that we have every room in the home support not just one or two, but all three kinds of relationship? Could we have an example of a giving, receiving, and a reciprocal relationship in every room of the house? An example being an opportunity to engage in that type of exchange. That was really where the rubber meets the road. That's taking this big idea and translating it into an actual real world tangible step,
Yeah.
that really anyone can do. And so that's the exciting part is that the single biggest predictor of our health, happiness, and longevity, according to Harvard big data, is something that anyone can do in their home. I was very relieved to find this out because you
Yeah.
don't want
Yeah.
something to learn about this great thing and have it be inaccessible,
Oh,
right?
100%. Yes, I was gonna say that's the thing that like kept coming back to my mind. I'm so glad that you already said it doesn't matter the size of the house, even because I could see people taking themselves out of the equation already and just going, I see these people in these grandiose, great neighborhoods, mansions, and their houses set up perfectly. And that's not what you're saying. It's
No,
available to everybody.
that's right. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Even a small apartment can be adjusted subtly in ways that are meaningful for sure. So let's take an example. There's a room that I think nobody really thinks of as a relationship cultivating space. It's not intended for relationships, a very private and personal space, and that's the bathroom.
I knew you were gonna go there. I'm so
Yeah, right.
intrigued.
The bath, because that's, I figured let's start with a challenge. It's like, is it possible to create all three kinds of relationship in every room in the house? I was like, well, the bathroom seems pretty impossible. If we can do it there, we can do it anywhere, right? Let's
Yeah.
see.
Oh my gosh.
And so the bathroom is this place where we typically just, it's a utility space. We go there to take care of the body and do our business. It's private. Maybe it's a space where we go to be alone for a few minutes. If you have young children hanging on your leg 24/7, you just need 5 minutes for a break. Or if you happen to be an introvert like myself and you're at a party and people, it's too much buzz in the air, you just need to take a deep breath, go to the
Yes.
bathroom. But the truth is, the bathroom it is those things. It is a private space, but it's also extremely rich territory to cultivate your sense of connection with the world around. And so let's look at giving relationships in the bathroom. Possible giving relationships are if you happen to have a window in the bathroom, an outside window, then bring a couple of plants in there and put them on the windowsill or hang them from the top of the window. Or if that's not feasible, then have a little shelf nearby or a plant stand with that they can get some light. If you don't have a window, then put in a full spectrum light bulb. And there's plenty of plants that can do just fine with that. So that you're not growing bananas and papayas and making a tropical rainforest in there. Just a few plants that, talk to your local garden center and tell them what your circumstances is, and they'll point you in the right direction. And plants aren't that expensive and it's super low maintenance. Like you once a week, take 3 steps from your sink over to the plant, give it some water, say hello, plant, prune off a leaf or something. And you're starting to cultivate a little bit of a giving relationship there, low effort. But it's more than that. Your bathroom, instead of just being a dead utility space, has taken one little step. You've cracked the door into it becoming an oasis, a living garden for you. And not only is it helpful for the relationship of creating a giving relationship, but there's also a physiological benefit to that. Because you may be surprised to hear an architect saying this, because architects are all like, hey, buildings, built environment, that's our trade, is creating habitat. But the reality is the human organism did not evolve inside of architecture. We evolved in nature. Nature is our natural habitat. And so no matter how beautiful your space is, no matter how aesthetically pleasing it is, it's not going to have the same unconscious, subtle, instinctual, physiological responses that seeing green growing things
Hmm.
does,
Interesting.
triggers in people. You can show 1,000 people a beautifully designed building or space, and they may all agree, yes, that's a beautiful space. Maybe not my style or my taste, but I can certainly appreciate the quality that's there. but they're not all going to have the same physical responses. Whereas if you show 1,000 people green growing things, a nature scene, what they may say, well, I prefer the beach or I prefer a mountaintop, and this is just a beautiful meadow with flowers and trees. Still, even though it may not be their preference, just like with the architectural style, physiologically, the mind calms, the breath becomes more deeper and less shallow. The heart rate, we achieve a resting heart rate more quickly and easily with this kind of visual cues. And that can lead to reduced blood pressure and stress. And we all know that stress shortens life expectancy. And so what happens is when we see green growing things, our environment starts sending cues. You're in your natural habitat. And so the body can relax. No matter how beautiful your home is, it's always going to be sending a subconscious signal. You're out of your element, and it's going to elicit a mild stress response. So just being indoors is stressful. I know that's strange to hear because home is also our sanctuary, and it is compared to the to the chaos of the world. It is our haven, but it's still a foreign environment from the perspective of the body. So bringing plants in, the more the better. Please do it, but at least get one or two in every room. So that's an example. Plants. Taking it one step further, what about putting a little fish bowl? Having a goldfish in your bathroom. You come in the morning, hi fish, sprinkle some food, and it's like a little spark of joy that's there. And so it's suddenly starting to become this living place. And that's really fun, if it suits you. These are just examples. Everyone has to do what feels right for them. So, examples of reciprocal relationships in the bathroom. We see this happen so frequently especially in the master suite. You see it double bowl sinks. You can brush your teeth side by side with somebody. But what about having a tub that's big enough for two? Very relaxing, possibly romantic, and nice. Something to do if your lifestyle, if it suits you. And also, if there's space, how about having a shower that's large enough for two people with two heads? And this is just about efficiency. I'm not talking, sexy time or something. It's just like rather than having to take turns, you can now shower simultaneously, and you don't have to work so hard to coordinate bathroom schedules with the people you're living with. Those are examples of reciprocal relationships. And receiving relationships, Lindsay, I think we can all find an image of someone that inspires us or someone that we know cares about us or encourages us to be the best version of ourselves and take that image and put it somewhere. So when you're washing your face or brushing your teeth, you can just glance at that and remember that there is someone out there who says, I care about you, I want the best for you. And then just feel that. Even if that person is far away or long gone, just the memory of that experience, of that quality can rekindle the experience of that. And how does that change how you feel standing on your own 2 feet, how you show up in the world? What sort of ripple effects you send out? How does that touch all of your interactions and what comes back to you from that? It's a tiny thing, but over time it can be like a snowball. It can just get bigger and bigger. And actually, we call that the butterfly effect. This mathematician wrote a paper. Did the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil eventually set off a tornado in Texas? And so what he charted out was the mathematical proof of how little things become big things. And so now it's not true that all little things become big things, but all big things started as little things. And so if you want big things in your life, start small, with that intention. And so look, just putting a plant and putting a picture of grandma or a spiritual figure in your bathroom might not change your life. But if you do it intentionally, then that's the secret sauce. That's the fuel that makes the engine go. Like I know how to brush my teeth on autopilot. I can be running through my to-do list or composing email while I'm, brushing my
Yes.
teeth. But which is fine. But we do this. We multitask. The mind is a more powerful machine than is required to just brush my teeth. Like we have the capacity to do two things at once. So go ahead and do that, but just take 5 seconds of your routine to gaze at that image and remember the feeling of being loved and supported and encouraged, and see what happens. Build that into your routine. And look, if it feels too prominent to have a picture of of someone in the bathroom like that, or it's like, well, I'm Catholic and my partner's Jewish, and you don't want to both have a picture of Jesus in the bathroom or something like that, that's fine. Try a nice quote, or a line from a letter that someone wrote you, and then script that out and put that up there, and just go over that almost like an affirmation. It's very subtle, something you can do, put it on the bathroom mirror or something. And it's not prominent, it won't get in anyone's face. And it's just, but for you, it's a little cue to remember that connection. And so these are examples, right? Giving, receiving, reciprocal relationships that you can do in the bathroom. Once you have that, once you know what examples of what that looks like, you can go through your whole home and do a self-assessment. Hey, and now I'm in this room. What kind of relationships are being supported or encouraged here? Do I have opportunities for all three? Are there gaps? What's well supported? What's less supported? Am I okay with that? Maybe I want to make a shift. Now you know how, and you can experiment and play with it. So you start with a self-assessment of your own home. Once you know, then you can measure, and then once you measure, you can adjust and feel, how does that feel for me? So because before, without this knowledge, if we just say, hey, we want relationships, it's too broad and you can't target it. It's this
Mhm.
moving, nebulous thing. But now we have a framework that we can use, and that's less haphazard. It infinitely increases our opportunity for success. Yes?
Yes, and two things that are good. One, I have chills while you're talking because this intentionality piece, I know it can sound cliche sometimes to have these quotes on the wall or whatnot, but the reality is I'm like thinking as a parent figure that our kids, whether they think they're seeing it every day or not, they go out into the world and can repeat or remember when we're intentional with things, again, to like serve an animal, to serve ourself, to pause, to not have everything be so autopilot in the day. That I love that. I just thank you for that. And then my question for you, and you might be getting to this, but like I keep thinking, how important is the spick and span cleanness part of everything tied in with the intentionality piece of it?
Yeah, it's a very germane and potent um, subject to talk about, is cleanliness, clutter, things like that. It's such a rich conversation. There's so much there. We could do a whole podcast episode just on that, and people do. So if I could just try to again talk about stones. What are some big things there? We know that clutter, seeing clutter, not for all people, but for many people, produces a stress response, and cortisol can spike in the body. Some people seem to not mind. They don't care about chaos. They're just fine with it. They're just not affected by that. It doesn't mess with them. But a lot of people, it makes a difference. And so architecture plays a huge factor in the cleanliness of the home. First off, we need size appropriate spaces. If you're trying to do too much in too small of a space, clutter is inevitable. It's just really difficult. The other thing is that these days we live in a different world than we did 100 years ago. 100 years ago, stuff was harder to come by. There were fewer factories. Things were typically made a little bit better quality to last a little bit longer. And therefore, it was a little bit more expensive, less supply, higher quality, a little costly. Today, real estate is expensive and stuff is cheap. And so it's very easy to have a small home with a lot of stuff. That's the dynamic that we're working with on planet Earth, at least in America. And so there's a little bit of effort required to be judicious about when we shop for stuff, to where we get something that's right and it's going to be worth hanging on to, and be more intentional about the stuff we're bringing home. I know it takes effort. There's only so much brain power and willpower you have in a day. You don't want to spend it on frivolous stuff and get decision fatigue. I'm speaking from compassion here. Conscious home design is not about perfection. It's not an all or nothing proposition. It's just an awareness of circumstances, and say, okay, well, what can I do? Are there little things I can do? And what's going to be low hanging fruit for me? So just an awareness of that this is the reality gives a little bit of forgiveness. It gives you permission to say, okay, I'm not perfect. And here's one of the reasons why. It might not be my fault. It might be the culture of just throw away cheap junk culture. It might be the architecture. It's not, the room isn't big enough to support this function. Like the entry space. If you've got a family of five and you're coming home into a little 6 by 6 mudroom, that's a problem. There's not room for all the people, let alone coats and boots and bags and backpacks and groceries and cell phones and keys and all the paraphernalia that's associated with transition from outside world to inside sanctuary. The entry space, if you even have one, some homes just open right up into the living room or into the kitchen. It's just poorly designed. But even if you have an entry space and it's not size appropriate and has good storage for all the paraphernalia and the things that need to go there, then clutter is going to happen. It's not your fault. It just is what it is. And so a well-designed space that has its size appropriate and has sufficient storage solutions for the things that need to live in that space. Then, once the habit is establish, okay, my keys always go here. And that way I've got a system. So in the morning, I'm never running around going, where are my keys? I always know where they are. They're right here. And the kids learn too. And it's like they know that their jacket always goes here. They know that their backpack always goes here. Once there's a place, once they've learned the habit, then it becomes autopilot. And so time spent interacting with the people you live with is less about nagging, pick up your thing. Why is the thing on the thing? It's more about having fun interactions about stuff. You're not nagging and chasing after each other for chores. It's not that anyone's lazy. It's just that there's no system in place. There's no place for that jacket to go. And so it's on the floor, right? That's
Yes.
the problem. And so it's an architectural problem largely. And so understanding these things can help you start to see in your own situation, are there solutions? Is there a way that I can create opportunity for storage or systems in place? If not, maybe the space is too small. It's a friction point that you just live with until you can move or do a renovation or build a brand new home. Call me up. I'm happy to design a beautiful home for you anywhere in the country, whatever your budget is. We always do the best we can with what we have. So clutter, it's real. And those are some of the reasons why, and some of the broad sort of overviewing concepts and solutions. I
Yeah.
can't really get into specific solutions right
No,
now. There's
no, I think you're doing
individual,
such a
but
good
that's
job. Yes,
thanks.
I'm
Okay, good.
already seeing part two. We're like barely touching the surface here, and it's so good. And I think the groundwork's so important. I was actually going to ask you, as a listener's going, okay, he does this, have this book, Conscious Home Design. What would be a tangible takeaway? What's that next step if someone's going, I love you. This is so interesting. I want those next tangible. Is it the book or is it following you, whether that's other podcasts or blogs or
I mean, I'm not that active on social media. I post links to podcasts and interviews and a little bit of content and stuff, but my best stuff is going to be in my book and the workbook that goes with that. So the book is, like I said, it's very accessible. It's easy to read. And it's the big stones that are in
yeah.
there. You can get a very great understanding of what things are and why they're important if you read that thoughtfully. Critics of the book have said it's too simple. It's like that's obvious. We know that. We know the kitchen is for preparing food. We know the family room is for hanging out with your loved ones. But if you pause and think about it more deeply, it's the intention behind it. It's the mindfulness around it. Then and take that time to actually think about it. That's the alchemy of taking something that seems obvious and making it so powerful. And my response to that is saying, yes, I agree. These things are obvious. Conscious home design is not rocket science. It really is obvious once you read it. But when I look at 99% of the floor plans out there that of homes, they're not following conscious home design principles. And even though it's so obvious. And so I still need to show up and raise my hand and say, hey, here's conscious home design for
Yes.
people. So the book itself is the big idea, Lindsay. Then I worked with someone who has a dual master's degree in social work. This person worked in government and had multiple people working under them, working on policies to affect people, but then went back to school and got a second master's degree in psychotherapy. And this person works as a counselor and now sees clients one on one as a career shift. And this person read the book, and together I said, "Hey, help me help people. I'm an architect. I'm not a counselor. And so I have interest and sensitivity to these things just from my own human experience, but I'm not qualified to do this work. And I'm not trying to do that work either. But what I want to do, going back to asking the right question, the quality of your question is the quality of your results. I said, what are the questions that we should be asking people to evoke and elicit and pull out these deep, heartfelt responses, these authentic responses from people? And once we have those answers, now as an architect, I can say, oh, this is what matters to you, to this person. This is their value system and structure. How can I shape space to support those types of endeavors and goals and outcomes that people, the things that feed you as an individual? What do you like to do, Lindsay, for creative expression? What do you like to do for personal growth and development? Because I have found that through the busyness of life, as demands for job or home or parenting or whatever pile up, one of the first things to get sacrificed is our creative expression activities. Oh, I used to love to play the cello. I used to love to paint. I used to love to do whatever it is. And now you wake up one day, it's been 5 years, 10 years, who knows how long it's been since you've
Mhm.
got to do that thing. And a little piece of you maybe like withering away and dying because you haven't been keeping that alive. And so the three kinds of relationships as we go through life, we're going to experience different quantities, but you want to have a well-rounded mix of those. But we also, beyond our relationships, we also have these personal growth needs and our creative expression needs, according to Maslow, the hierarchy of human needs pyramid. And so another principle in conscious home design is not just creating beautiful shelter that satisfies the intellect and the body, but also helps develop the inner you. And so that's really something that I want to ask. What do you do for personal development? What do you do for creative activity? And when we can dedicate space to an endeavor, then you're so much more likely to have success in that. Think about the Mona Lisa. It's the most famous painting in the world. It's 500 years old. By now, everyone's heard of it. Leonardo da Vinci painted it in the early 1500s, and it took him more than a decade to finish that painting. Some experts estimate, between 15 and 17 years. Conservatively, I just say, well, it was more than 10. And so that shows to me that when we dedicate space, because he had an art studio, and so when he was busy on other projects or he didn't have the inspiration for that painting, he was able to keep it there and then come back to it. And so having space dedicated to your activity allows you the opportunity to do that activity. We all know that it takes time and effort to accomplish something. Practice makes perfect, but it also takes space. That's the missing piece. That's the missing piece of the formula. It is. And so if your cello is locked up in a case in a closet and you only have 10 minutes, you're not going to get that out and do it. But if you have it set up in a nice corner with a sunny window or something, there's just a protective cover over a dust cloth, then if all you have is 10 minutes, you can just step in, pull the cover off and do a few scales or play a song. And maybe it's not 2 hours like you used to play once upon a time, but even 10 minutes. Every little step you can take in the direction of your goals sets up a positive feedback loop. The environment is signaling to you, you know what's important to me, what matters to me, what feeds me is possible. My life does have possibility. Life works for me, rather than feeling like you're hemmed in and hampered and one arm's tied behind your back. Oh, it's not working for me. No, now it is. It may not be perfect, but you still have potential. And that's hope. That's hopeful. So conscious home design really is about hope.
Oh, it's so good. I feel like we kind of live these parallel lives in different professions because everything we even use same lingo. It's really not about perfection. It's really about showing up to tiny little by little by. You're describing what I would call ripple effects, even if we can make little things easier, they ripple into other aspects of our life feeling easier and more pleasant. Like it's just cool to listen and you have a very soothing voice. I feel like you could be this meditational voice at the end of the evening. But
Thank you.
very enjoyable to listen to this. And I hope that our listeners are going, oh, I see these little areas I could start to work on. And they matter, even though they feel so small. Like you said, they compound. And at the end of it, they give us this bigger success in different areas of our life. From relationships to our overall health, our longevity. So it's so good. And I hate to be rounding this out. I do feel like anybody who's listening, we promise to put links in the show notes so you know exactly where to go find more, where to go find the book. And I need you to pretend that you are wrapping your arms around our listeners and you're like, if you hear nothing else today, what's the one takeaway that, like, please hear this?
Yeah. Okay. The single biggest thing that I would like people to walk away from the show with today is the idea of nurturing relationships. And that's because the math says it actually makes a difference to our life expectancy. And so we all get up in the morning and we all say, I do everything I do for my family. And any spare time I have, I want to spend with my friends too. You know, my friends and family is my reason for living. It's why I get out of bed. But we can feel guilty or not prioritize it. It can stay that desire to spend time with friends and family might stay on a wish list for us. But now that we have the math and the data behind the study that says no, it really matters, it gives us permission to move it off of the wish list and onto our must have list, and we can prioritize it. And so I've shared a few insights into that giving, receiving, and reciprocal qualities of relationship, and a few ways that that can show up in your home. So do an assessment. You asked me how to go deeper. I mentioned the workbook. On my website, I've got a bundle. People can get an instant digital download of the book, the audio book, so you can listen to it as you drive or work out, and the workbook. And that's the workbook is about taking the big ideas, those stones in the book, and applying them into your own situations. Asking those questions. It's fun, thoughtful PDF exercises that you can do. If you want to spend a little bit more, you can get a physical copy. I'll sign it and mail it to you through the snail mail, and you'll also get the instant digital download at the same time. And you can also pick my brain, and I'll review your workbook and give you some feedback on what I think could be some effective shifts that you could do in your home. So conscioushomedesign.com is where people could get those bundles if they wanted to, and also if they just want to do a consult with me for their project, then certainly fill out the contact me form, and I'll happily respond. So I think that sort of wraps it up. That's the big idea and the big picture, and how to get more. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me.
Taylor, you're wonderful. We're so blessed to have you today. Thank you.